It's good to be here this morning. As it is the fourth Sunday of the month, and as I often try to do, because we are going to worship in song this evening, I try to go through and to look at one of the songs that we may find ourselves singing at some point, recognizing that we are taught that we are to sing with the Spirit and we are to sing with the understanding. And so sometimes it is very good for us to take a step back and to look at what it is that we are stating when we are singing these songs. For example, if we were to sing the song, "I'll Be a Worker," then we have to ask ourselves, will I be a worker? Or am I just making a statement? Because we're professing to God that we're going to do something, and we're professing to one another. So it's important that we recognize the commitments and the things that we're singing. And so I decided to look at a song in keeping along with the idea of Thanksgiving and keeping along with the idea of the time of the year, entitled "We Thank Thee, Lord." And that is song number 10 in our songbooks, if you wanted to open up and take a look there, or you'll see the words written on our slides. And I have to admit, I don't recall if I've ever sung this here or really anywhere. It's not one that I was familiar with when I was looking at it, and that was another reason for why I picked this particular song, is so that I could learn just a little bit more about what it is that the author was trying to get us to consider and some things that we can be thankful for to the Lord. In the Psalm, the 68th chapter and verse 19, you see the psalmist write, "Blessed be the Lord who daily loads us with benefits." You know, I've never really saw and looked at that particular translation and looked at that particular statement, but what a great statement. Who daily loads us with benefits. There's two things that jump out at me. The first is that it's not something that happens intermittent, right? That every now and then we're blessed. So it's something that happens daily, and the second thing is it's not on a small scale. We are blessed with loads of benefits. And when you think of loads of something, you think of trying to carry or trying to lift. You have so much that you can't carry an entire load. And so I look at this, I say, blessed be the Lord who daily loads us with benefits. How often do we go through our day and just stop and say, wow, that was a benefit from the Lord. Wow, that was a benefit from the Lord. Wow, that was, often we sit back and we think, boy, I can't believe that just happened, and I can't believe that just happened, and oh, look, I did real good on this test. I'm real proud of myself, but nothing in relation to everything that's going on daily in our lives. And that to me was something, again, that really jumped out from this verse. That term daily. I've mentioned, it's been mentioned on many times, that this is the time of year where we take one day out of the year and we start talking about we should be thankful for all the benefits that we have. And while it's good that we're teaching people to be thankful, we need to be thankful the other 364 or other 365, depending on if it's a fourth year. We need to be thankful for all those other days of the year. Thanksgiving is a lifestyle. It is not just a simple action in my belief. It is actually a lifestyle. It is how you live. And there is so much that we can be thankful for that it would be impossible to give the amount of time deserved to all the blessings that we receive. I think that a lot of people, and I've already done a lesson on Count Your Many Blessings, but I know a lot of people, that's the first thing that they think of when they think of, oh, it's Thanksgiving and it's time to do a song. Let's do Count Your Many Blessings, right? Why do we sing that? We sing it because it reminds us of something, and we even sing in the song, it will surprise you what the Lord has done. If you stop and you think about all of the benefits, if you were to stop and to sit down and write down or make a checkpoint somewhere every time you recognized a benefit from the Lord, you'd be amazed. Not the least of which was mentioned in a prayer this morning, when there was thankfulness for the rain. A lot of us don't think that that's a blessing, don't want to believe that that's a blessing, but I'll tell you what, if you've ever been in a situation where there's a drought and they start telling you that you can't take showers and you can't water your lawn and you can't do anything because there's no water, you realize just how blessed we are that God provides rain so that there is enough for us to be able to do those things. So we're going to take a look at a few things here. The song starts out, for all the blessings of the year. And immediately I go back to the previous, okay, now loads of blessings every day for 365 days. And so start multiplying out how much you're actually talking about. And turn, if you would, to Psalm the 65th chapter. We're going to look at verses 9 through 13, but really the entire psalm talks about the greatness of God. But I want to focus on what's written beginning at verse 9. The psalmist writes, "You visit the earth and water it. You greatly enrich it. The river of God is full of water. You provide the grain so you prepared it. You water its ridges abundantly. You settle its furrows. You make it soft with showers. You bless its growth." So here we go over and over again, just talking about the land that we have. Look at all of the things that the Lord is doing in order for us to be able to benefit from that. And he goes on to say, "You crown the year with your goodness, and your paths drip with abundance. They drop on the pastures of the wilderness, and the little hills rejoice on every side. The pastures are clothed with flocks. The valleys also are covered with grain. They shout for joy. They also sing." Look at all of these things that the Lord is doing. And then he even makes a statement, you crown the entire year with your blessings. And so it's easy, and it's easy to sit back and even when we go through life, we think of the big things, right? We think of the big thing. We may not even be thinking about blessings until something major happens in our life, and we're grateful for that. We think about the blessings of newborns. We think about the blessings of life in general. And sometimes we forget just to be thankful that we got out of bed this morning. Right? Somewhere, someone this morning didn't make it out of bed. You ever think about that? Somewhere, someone couldn't get out of bed this morning. But I was able to. I complain about, I don't want to drive in the rain. Somewhere, someone doesn't have a vehicle to drive in the rain, right? It's the little things. Somewhere, someone didn't have breakfast this morning. Not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't have it. I didn't have breakfast this morning because I didn't want to, but I'll tell you what, I could have had a feast in the minds of those that don't have much. When we had a preacher stay with us from Africa, and he was just, I think I've mentioned this, he was dumbfounded that you can pick between 4 different cereals. He's like, wow, you have like 4 cereals to choose from? He's used to, we have bread and water in the morning. That's what and if we get that, we're grateful for that. So we forget about the little things. In Psalm chapter 40 and verse 5, it says, many, again, look at these words, abundance, loads, bountiful, many, O Lord my God, are your wonderful works, which you have done, and your thoughts toward us cannot be recounted to you in order. If I would declare and speak of them, they are more than can be numbered. Because he daily blesses us with benefits abundantly, there's no way that we could recount them all to him if we had the opportunity to step back and to do that. Because he blesses us daily throughout the year. And then James writes, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. Every good and perfect gift comes from whom? Right? Every good and perfect gift comes from the Father above. And so throughout the year, let's look back. People look back on, and people really we're in 2022 now, but people go back and look at 2021, and how do they remember that? They remember it as the year of COVID, right? That's what they think of when they describe the year. But that was such a small thing in comparison to everything else that took place in our lives. Such a small thing. I mean, I could look back, and again, I've used this example because it's something that really opened my eyes. But I could look back and I could say, you know what, COVID prevented me from taking a trip that I wanted to take. Or I can remember that once I overcame COVID, I got the blessing of taking a trip I had never taken in my life before. Right? That's one of the ways that I'll remember the year, is having an opportunity to spend some time with my wife doing something I had never done before. But I could sit back and say it was the year of COVID if I wanted to. You know? Or I could sit back and say, look at the many people that were affected by COVID, including myself and my family. I overcame it. My mother, who has leukemia, was able to overcome it when I really thought that might be the end. That's a blessing. The fact that she was able to get through that and to still be here and to wake up every morning and know. And like I said, from a strictly guilty standpoint, I don't want my mom leaving this earth. And I think about it a lot because of the situation. And from a guilty from a purely, I guess, all about me standpoint, it's the idea of me losing her as much as it is her just not being here. It's about the idea that it's something that's being taken away from me. Do we think about the blessings that we have in family and family close by? You know, family close by. And the blessing that we have that even though family can live on the other side of the United States, I can talk to them. I can even see them anytime I want to. It's not like in the past where you had to rely and hope a letter got to someone that you mailed, right? Are we ever thankful for the fact, we talk about all the things that we're able to do with the internet. Have we ever thought about the fact of how it allows us to stay connected if we use it properly? That we can actually reach out, and while my family has never been to my home because it's so far away, they've had the ability to see it. They've even had the ability to have a tour of it. That's a blessing. That's something that I couldn't describe to them and really allow for them to appreciate it, nor could they appreciate what we have been blessed with as much as being able to see it. Those are blessings that come throughout the year. Those are things that we don't think about, but we need to. And then how about for all the friends we hold so dear? There's something to be said for being stuck alone, and something to be said for the friends that we share. And again, we all learned a lot about that in 2021. We learned what it was like when we couldn't be with those friends that we have and that we love and care for, right? I think we learned an awful lot about how much we really missed them when we couldn't see them. We kind of took it for granted because we could see them anytime we wanted to. But do we think about it? And do we have dear and close friends, or have we closed ourselves off? Are we someone who's decided to say, I don't, well, if you're a person that doesn't have this, if you're a person that chooses not to partake, then you shouldn't be thanking God for that blessing because it's not something that you're taking advantage of. But he has blessed us with people in our lives. We're familiar with Ecclesiastes chapter 4. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. And I got to, has that ever happened to you? I mean, like literally happened to you? Have you fallen and no one was there? When I broke my right ankle, it was in a parking lot somewhere where I was by myself. I can tell you, I laid on my back for quite a while before I was able to even get up. Because I didn't have friends around me. I didn't have anybody with me to help lift me up. Finally, somebody took pity and came and checked on me. But it wasn't until somebody came to me and actually helped lift me up that I was able to get up. I mean, do we really? I mean, God tells us, and there's real world example. If you fall and there's no one with you, you may not be able to get up. Are you thankful that there's someone there? Are you thankful for the companion that God has blessed you with in marriage, if you've been blessed enough to be married? Are you thankful for the fact that you have that friend that's always there? I know I have to admit, I take my wife for granted. And I shouldn't say that, and I try very hard not to. But the truth is, I just get so used to her being there and her doing what she does, and I'm sure men will echo this, we get so used to what our wives do for us that we often forget. See, I know Lenny's got a really guilty look on his face, and so I'll use him as an example just because he looks guilty. But do we recognize that, you know? Do we recognize that our best friend on this earth should be our spouse? I don't know. I think that's why so many marriages fail. Because they don't recognize the blessing they have from God in having that best friend there. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And then, though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Two is stronger than one, and three is stronger than two, and so it goes. And are we thankful? You know, and what a perfect song. I'll Be a Friend to Jesus was a perfect song to come up as I was thinking about this lesson. And then I have to ask myself, that's a huge question we have to ask ourselves when we sing that song. Am I his friend? Am I willing to go where he will send me? Even if the world turns against me, I'll never turn against him. To all who need a Savior, to all who need a Savior, my friend, I recommend. Do you recommend him? Or do you not talk about him at all? Right? But what an amazing thing to be able to say that we can call the Son of God our friend. And that he calls us his friend. Proverbs 17:17 says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born out of adversity. Here's one, 27:6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Do we really want to go through life with people just telling us everything's fine when we're making mistakes? What really ends up happening? At some point we stumble or we find harm because somebody wasn't warning us and being honest with us about the mistakes we were making, right? How many of you as Christians want somebody to come and tell you if they know you're acting in error and you don't realize it? Most of the time we talk about how it's uncomfortable, we should like that, right? We should like the fact that they're willing to come to us and that they're willing to help us so that we may do better. But if we just sit back and remain, quote, their friend and allow them to struggle, what have we done? Absolutely nothing for them, right? We've actually really put them in harm's way. So we need to be thankful that we have friends that are willing to help keep us on the right track, even those times when it's uncomfortable, when they correct us. And you know what? If you've gone through your entire life, you've been corrected at some point. You've been corrected, and you'll probably be corrected again. And that's okay. We make mistakes, and that's why we have others to help us out. Proverbs 27:9, ointment and perfume delight the heart, and the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by hearty counsel. So, good news and good advice from a friend is a blessing, right? When we have people pointing us in the right direction, it's a blessing. It's a gift. And where do all good and perfect gifts come from? They come from God, who has allowed this person to come into our lives, to be here in order to give us that good information, right? So while we're grateful for the friend that does it, who else should we be grateful for? The one who allowed for this person to come into our lives as well. And then he says, I was going to mention too, you can mark down, the relationship between David and Jonathan. If you really want to do a study on what true friendship looks like, and again, not as the world tries to mess up that relationship, but if you want to look at what true relationship looks like, and whether or not there should be love in a true relationship, and see, that's what the world doesn't get. You know, the world wants to look at it and try to create a different relationship because it says David loved Jonathan and Jonathan loved David. Well, I hope they did, and I believe they did. And I hope that you can say that if you're a male and you have a male friend, I hope you can say I have love or I love this individual, right? Without the world messing that up. But go through and look at it and look at when he talks about how Saul and Jonathan are slain. And then he talks about how the mighty have fallen, and he talks about, but then he talks about how Jonathan in his life was good for him. That's basically what he mentions, is that Jonathan was good for him and that he's going to miss him because he's gone. And we should miss our friends. So for peace on earth, both far and near, and there's a couple of different ways you could consider the idea of peace. For your records, this is just a small sample of verses that we can look at in Scripture that talk about the idea of peace kind of in a broad sense. In Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, in speaking of the coming of Christ, it says, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end upon the throne of David's and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this." We should be grateful that there is peace for the most part in this world today. For the most part, there is peace. There are some places where there is turmoil and tribulation, but it's been a whole lot worse. And it could be a whole lot worse. And we should be thankful for the peace that we have just in general as a nation. I know we often talk about when times are going rough and we start talking about things that are working their way into government and things like that and are creating turmoil. But to recognize there's a peace right now that we still have. Okay, so there's that, and there's that peace far and wide. But then there's also the peace, I believe, that's talked about Psalm chapter 4 and verse 8, where the psalmist says, "I will both lie down in peace and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. I feel a sense of peace, so I'm able to sleep." Right? I'm sure we've all had times where we didn't necessarily feel that peace, right? Ever had times where you can't find peace at night and how hard it is to fall asleep when you're not in a peaceful state, when you're struggling with things? When times are difficult, we need to take a step back. When times are difficult, we need to be thankful that God can provide peace, and that we can, through his peace and through that calm, find a way to rest, find a way to sleep. It says, "Great peace have those who love your law, and nothing causes them to stumble." Isaiah 26:3 says, "You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts you." So how do we get this peace? We get it by trusting in God, right? You wonder why people don't have peace in their lives? They don't trust that God is in control. That's probably the easiest way to put it. If your life is unsettled, it's because you don't trust that God is in control. If you trust that God is in control, no matter what the circumstances, you can find peace. And we have examples of it in Scripture, and we have examples of it in the lives of brothers and sisters that we've seen that have struggled, but still found peace with God. And we should be thankful for that as well. And then, of course, there is the Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 7 is probably the first passage that most people think of. "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Peace on earth comes from who? That's right. Peace comes from God. Verse 2, and we're not going to do verse 3, but we'll look at verse 2. For time's sake, we won't go into 3. It says, "For life and health, those common things which every day and hour brings." See, again, every day, every hour, we're blessed with God's benefits. Every hour, every day, God's benefits. Psalm 119, verses 13 and 14. "For you formed my inward parts, you covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well." We need to be thankful for life. We have life because God chose to create man in the first place. God could have decided to create the beasts of the field and the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. Could have left it at that. We wouldn't exist, right? God chose to create man in his own image. God chose to give us life, and we should be thankful for that. Like I said, someone somewhere didn't get out of bed this morning. Someone somewhere passed. Whether it was in comfort or discomfort, the fact is it happened. We should be thankful for the life that we have. In Acts chapter 17 and verse 28, it says, "For in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring." So he's reminding the people there, your poets have even talked about the fact that you claim to be his offspring. So it is because of God that we move and breathe and we exist. And so we need to be thankful for that. Psalm chapter 103. "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits," his abundant daily benefits. "Who forgives all your iniquities, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from destruction, who crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfies your mouth with good things, so that your mouth is renewed your youth is renewed like the eagles." He heals all your diseases. He satisfies you. He redeems your life. These are, unfortunately, things that we look at as simply common things. I get up every day, so I forget it's a blessing to be able to get up every day, right? It's unfortunate, but we forget about it. I very much believe that the reason that we come together around the Lord's table on a weekly basis is because if we didn't, we'd take the blessing for granted, right? We'd forget about it. This reminds us of what Jesus Christ did because it refocuses us. It refocuses us. It gets our mind back to where it belongs. And then we can be thankful for the fact that when our health isn't so great, we have a place to turn, right? We're thankful for the good health. We need to be thankful that when the bad health comes, we have a place to turn, right? There's someone that we can go, and even if we don't get what we want, we can find the peace we were just talking about. So there's a blessing that we have even in our difficult health. In James chapter 5, verses 14 and 15, "Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith will save the sick, and the Lord will raise him up, and if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven." But what we're focusing on this particular verse for our sake this lesson is the idea of praying to God for those who are sick. And God wouldn't tell us to waste our time. I don't believe James would tell us to waste our time. If God didn't have the ability to heal the sick, he wouldn't ask you to pray for it. Do we believe that? So I'm grateful. I'm thankful that we have a chance. And then lastly it says, "For home where our affection clings." One writer says there's a difference between a house and a home. A house is a very physical thing, made up of such things as timber, bricks, mortar, carpet, and furniture. On the other hand, a home consists of people, especially family. But that's a good way to look at it, because home is where your family dwells, right? Home is where the heart is. Home is where your family dwells. Whether it's your family with your parents and things as you grow up, whether it's you and your spouse if you have one, or whomever that you choose, but it's where your family is. And so that's a blessing. Having a family is a blessing. Genesis 2:24, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." Now, there's been some study, and again, I don't want to overthink, as we talked about in class. I don't want to overthink, but there has been some study on this idea of flesh and keeping it in context of verse 23 where he talks about you are now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, as in we are now of the same blood, which is what family is. We are of one blood. And there have been a couple of translations that have said that he will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one family. And I do believe, metaphorically at least, that there is something to that. That this coming together of one, that this idea of being of one blood is they become family. Weren't they family at that point? If you're married when you married your spouse, isn't it at that very point that you became a family? When you were joined together. So I think that's a fair interpretation of what is being taught here, is that as the two become one in one flesh, they become a one family. And so we look at the idea of children as part of the home. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gate. And so there is this idea and this gratefulness for the joy of having children. While they don't always feel like it, children are a blessing from God. And as a matter of fact, when they get at their worst, that's when you have to start giving yourself the mantra, children are a blessing from God. Children are a blessing from God. It doesn't feel like it, does it? There can be times in your life where children feel like nothing but a burden. But I'll tell you what, I'd rather have gone through the struggles I've gone through with my children than to never have had them at all. And I can't think of a parent that wouldn't say otherwise. I'd rather go through the times where they're a burden than to lose the blessing of having them at all. And so really that's where we're going to conclude the lesson, as I said, for time's sake, and I still ran over, but for time's sake, we're not going to go into the third verse, but what's the conclusion? Throughout the song, we make the statement, for these things we thank thee, Lord. So my question for you this morning as we close out this service is, do we really thank him? Are we really thankful? And thankfulness is shown not just in word, but in action. And if we have obeyed his will, if we have accepted those gifts that we are so thankful for and been buried in the waters of baptism, then we're in a very good place with the Lord. But if we haven't been thankful for those gifts, and the reason we know that to be the case is because we've refused to do those things that God has asked us to do. If we have not chosen to obey his will, despite the fact that there are multiple blessings in our lives, then we need to ask ourselves why. And we need to ask ourselves, what's keeping me from being thankful? Or if you've already accepted and you've done what God would have you do, but somehow you're just not feeling it anymore. Somehow you're just not seeing it. We talked in our Bible class, life has ebbs and flows and ups and downs. And we go through those times where we absolutely don't. Those are the times where I was talking about we need to sit down and write benefit for today, benefit for today, benefit for today, benefit for today. Because there are times when we struggle. And maybe we haven't been as thankful as we ought to be. You know that we can pray to God as a group for what he's done and be thankful as a congregation for what he's done. If there's anything that we can do to help you in order to better your spiritual life, let us know while we stand and while we sing.